Hello everybody, I'm Iain and in this video I'd like to talk about the importance of live practice, the need for live practice to be specific, and some of the illogical things we hear said about live practice. So the first thing is, and this should be obvious, live practice is a must. It's a must. You need to train live if you wish to be able to apply your skills live. Other forms of training, fitness and conditioning, solo drills, technical training, pad drills, all that kind of stuff, compliant partner drills, all have a role to play. But ultimately, you need to practice applying those skills live against someone who is resisting if you are to develop true functional skill. You sometimes hear people saying, oh, but my art is far too dangerous to be drilled live. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. I'm going to use an example, right? I've sometimes heard people from very traditional jiu-jitsu styles make that claim. Or we can't practice our throws live because we do the throws in such a way that the guy would land on his head. But in judo, they've made the throws safer and therefore they can practice them live. Well, this is what I call the rules paradox, right? Because I would argue that that judo player will be a more effective thrower. Those safer throws that they've practiced live, they will actually be able to pull off in live combat. The people who have not practiced their dangerous throws live stand very little chance of being able to pull them off. So sometimes we do make compromises in the name of safety, but that will lead to a greater increase in functionality. Okay, you can still practice those dangerous throws if you like with a partner in a safe way. But you need safe ways to drill live because you need live practice. Okay, so that's one of the illogical things. It's too dangerous to drill live. There's ways to do it. There are. And you can use substitution or emission. Or you can't eye gouge in sparring. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Just touch there. If you get the thumb above it and push it to his forehead, your partner has to deal with it as if it was an eye gouge. Sometimes there's the argument, oh, but in reality they might have developed the bad habit of doing this. Maybe. But at least you and your partner have kind of practiced, actually trying to get those eye gouges in and trying to defend against them, right? You can drill live. You should drill live. So that's one of the things we hear. The other thing that I sometimes hear about live practice, it shows me that people fail to understand just how significant a change in objective is. Because it changes pretty much everything. As soon as you change the objective, you change the way in which you achieve that objective. So the strategy is different, the tactics are different, and because they're different, the choice of technique will be different. Everything starts to change once you change the objective. It's not just enough that you train live, you need to train live in a way that's congruent with the stated objective. Should seem obvious, sadly it would seem that's not the case. So to give an extreme example, right, which you will acknowledge is ridiculous, and then we'll look at ones that I find equally ridiculous, but nevertheless are out there, right? If I decided, I want to improve my ability to box, I want to be a really good boxer, I want to win some boxing bouts. So what I've done to achieve that aim is I've taken up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. People would go, well, that's wrong. And I go, no, wait a minute. They train live in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you go, yeah, they do, but for an entirely different objective. If you want to be a good boxer, you need to train live in a way that is congruent with the goals of boxing, right? So when it comes to self-protection, the self-protection side of things, you need to do the same. It's not enough just to say, well, I've trained in combat sports, which have live practice, and therefore I'm able to defend myself effectively. No doubt there's some crossover, and no doubt your combative skills will be a huge help to you. But the objective is different. It's not getting a submission. It's not knocking a guy out where his brain doesn't function for 10 seconds. You've got to consider multiple opponents. You've got to consider the law. You've got to consider protecting other people. You've got to look at escape skills and witness perceptions. So if you're truly serious about developing self-protection skills, yes, you need live practice, but those live scenarios need to reflect the nature of self-protection. It's not enough that you've just got some live practice. It needs to be specific live practice. Because once the goal changes, the objective changes, everything else changes with it. If you employ a combat sports strategy to to self-protection, you will find yourself either in physical trouble or legal trouble. Right? I've given loads of examples in this before. Let's take MMA, right? So in MMA, a guy hits the ground. The way you win that fight is you jump on top of him and you continue to punch his lights out until the referee pulls you off, right? That's the right thing to do in that context. If you were to do that in self-protection, you'll suddenly find there's a lot of witnesses that feel sorry for this poor guy that was on the floor, that you were kneeling on, punching the living daylights out of it, right? You are likely to find yourself incorrectly perceived as being the aggressor, and you will find yourself in legal trouble. Also, while you're doing that, what about his friend? What about the second person who comes up and stabs you, hits you, breaks a chair over the back of your head? You know, it's not the right objective. The objective for self-protection is to avoid harm, so you need to consider escape. Most combat sports have rules specifically designed for you not to do that. They want to see a fight. So the rules are there to encourage you to fight. You're not allowed to think about, how do I disengage? How do I escape? It's really, really important that people understand the objective changes everything. So when we talk about, combat sports are great. They invariably develop high skills. They will make you a skilled combat athlete. There is definitely some transferable skills there, but you can't just simply say, well, I've trained combat sports, therefore I'm done. It needs to be the specific live practice. Just as in you could be a good boxer, doesn't mean you're going to win a wrestling bout, right? You need to do live practice that's specific to the actual objective itself. Now, again, as someone who comes from a traditional art, although obviously I've trained combat sports too, but it comes from that traditional art. One thing we need to remember is that traditional art always did have live practice. Live practice didn't come about with the advent of combat sports. What do we think these warriors, soldiers were doing for eons before the advent of combat sports? We know, you think of your samurais, your Vikings, they practiced, they trained. Your Spartan warriors, the Greeks, they trained, they practiced live, developing their skills ready for actual combat, not for combat sports, right? They did it to develop that combative skill. When I look at the history of karate, which is my art, you read like Gichin Funakoshi, regarded as the father of modern karate. In his book, Karate Do My Way of Life, he talks about grappling to unconsciousness or submission as a youth in Okinawa. He talks about live drills where they would try and fend off and escape multiple opponents. Funakoshi says, I can think of no better way than this to learn to defend against multiple opponents. Live practice has to be part of the procedure and always was. Now, as the objectives change, sometimes people practice martial arts as pure art or just as, physical expression, in which case the live practice disappears. But if you're wanting to practice the art traditionally, you should include that live practice that was always there in the past. So live practice is absolutely a must. It is a must to develop functional skill, but it needs to be specific for the stated objective. It's not just enough to say, I do some live practice, therefore job done, right? Combat sports, as great as they are not the only form of live practice. And the live practice associated with combat sports is not specific enough for self-protection. One final thing on this as well is sometimes an arrogance that martial artists have. You see this quite a lot, that, well, if I can defeat a fellow martial artist in a consensual exchange, then I'll easily be able to deal with an untrained criminal in a non-consensual exchange. It's not true. You're missing the point. And again, you should know it's not true. That there are cases of high-level combat athletes being killed by criminals who have nowhere near the level of training they get because they're not behaving in the way that you would associate with the consensual combat sport, right? They're using surprise numbers, weapons, all that kind of stuff. In live practice, you need drills where people are taken by surprise. We do this in my dojo. Some of you have done this with me. I will tell people in the dojo, you're free to attack anyone at any point tonight. Other people, they're all padded up. They know that there's other people in the room that can attack them. We can be halfway through a kata or halfway through me explaining something, and they suddenly get blindsided by one of the training partners, right? So that they're used to this. And it also helps with their awareness. They're like, okay, who is it? Who's going to move? There are ways to drill stuff live. Lots of self-protection instructors include live training. You should include live training. The argument that you somehow don't need to because the techniques are too dangerous doesn't hold water. The argument that combat sports are all you need doesn't hold water. Live practice is a must. It needs to be specific to the objective. Everyone can do it, everyone should do it, and if you're wanting functional skills, define the objective and do live training drills that are congruent with that objective.